Frank's Red Hot is the perfect blend of flavor and heat, so you can use an entire bottle to make recipes like buffalo chicken dip or buffalo nachos, or even things that don't start with buffalo. Frank's Red Hot, I put that on everything.
Craig? Is that you?
I can see you.
I can see you.
Across the table.
You're across the table from me.
Oh
Hey!
my
High
God.
five! All right.
Almost 6 feet. Close enough.
Yeah, we're close enough. I don't know. How wide's your dining room table?
I don't know. Not 6 feet.
It's probably not 6 feet. It's probably more like 3?
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody.
We're also not wearing masks. Don't tell anybody that either.
We are drinking beer, though, so.
And podcasting. It'd be tough to drink beer and podcast with a mask on.
Well, welcome to Podcast versus Everyone, in-person edition for only, I don't know, like the fourth time or
Yeah.
so. I am your host, Craig Powers, and with me is Jeff Newser, as always. Jeff, how was the drive over?
It's pretty good. It was. I got to admit, it was nice to get out of the house and drive somewhere. And you know, we started school last Thursday, and we're supposed to resume school on Tuesday, but fires in the Puyallup, Sumner, Bonnie Lake area conspired. Apparently, everybody's out of power, so they canceled school. That was a first for me. I've had school canceled for a number of reasons over the years. A power outage caused by wildfires in Western Washington is a new one.
That is new.
I definitely have never had the third day of school canceled before.
Yeah, it's been a pretty scary time. Obviously, one of our co-authors at Coug Center, Brian Floyd, has had to flee his home.
Yeah,
which is very scary. So be safe if you're out there. You're dealing with fires. That sucks. It's a scary time. I just have to deal with smoke, but I know it's a lot worse for some other people.
Yeah, smoke. You know, in the grand scheme of things, a little bit of smoke ain't the worst thing in the world for sure.
Yeah, for sure. One of the not so good things in the world this week is we lost our voice of the Cougs, Bob Robertson. Yeah, it's just it's a bummer. Obviously, he lived a long life, 92, I think, but obviously over half of that, or roughly half of that, as over half as the Cougars football announcer. So pretty cool. Voice for the Cougs. Jeff, I know that you wrote a little bit about it on Coug Center, but do you have any thoughts and memories of Bob Robertson?
Yeah, you know, it's funny, when I was getting ready to sit down and write that, I felt really inadequate to write that. Like, and it's kind of crazy because I've been a Coug for, I don't know, 20 years now, 21 years. No, more than that, because I graduated in 99. It's like 25 years.
Yeah.
And so that's a long time. And Bob Rob was, the voice of the Cougs for, the majority of that. Yeah. And so, you would think that I would have a lot of very profound things to say. And it just, I don't know, man, when someone like that predates, like he predated me by so many decades, that I just sort of felt like, gosh, I don't know. I just feel like people who had, a longer experience with him. And there were a few of those that dropped into our comments on Coug Center, where I was like, that's kind of what I was hoping for, because, my experience with him, and it's kind of funny, like my closest interaction with him is what I wrote about on the site, which is I was a senior in high school, wasn't a Coug yet, got taken up to the booth by my journalism teacher, Vince DeMiro, who had been his producer engineer for a number of years on the radio broadcast. And, it was a very, pleasant, cordial meeting. I didn't know who the guy was at all. I'd never heard of him, know, and this is, and I remember Vince was like, this is Bob Robertson. Yeah. And I'm like, cool. Cause I'm 17 and I'm an idiot. Right. Yeah. And, and he of course was, wonderful and very, cordial and patient. Now he was doing the pregame show, so it was brief. But, and Vince is like, check it out. He totals the yards on an abacus. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. Like, cool, I was like, I was like, I remember I got taught to use an abacus like, I don't know, 6th grade or something like that.
I never got taught to use an
abacus. Yeah, we used it. We used it for like 3 days in math, and it was like, check it out, it's an abacus. Yeah, so like that was it. And then, you know, it was funny. I spent so much time in the press box as a student, and then, you know, at times even as an alum. And, you know, we just didn't cross paths all that much. You know, I'd walk by the booth, I'd see him in there, you know, him and Walden doing their thing. And anybody who was up in the old Martin Stadium press box, which was basically a giant, you know, trailer sitting on some stilts.
Yeah.
One of the charms of it was, you know, when the food was being served during halftime, it would, everybody was in line. So for me, like I'm sitting there and I'm grabbing as much food as I can because I'm a student and I'm poor, and, you know, I'm like, I'm going to eat as much free food as possible. You know, and you'd stand in that line and you might be standing next to, you know, Keith Jackson because he was calling the game that day, or you might be standing next to Sam Smith, the university president, or you might be standing next to Bob Robertson. So, you know, there were some times where, you know, we kind of passed each other out there, but the thing I remember the most about him as a broadcaster was, you know, he's just so good at painting a picture. Really excellent descriptions, which if you listen to football broadcasters, not all of them are good at that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a football broadcaster that broadcasts for our professional football team in Seattle who is not so great at painting a picture. Right. So, you know, you really kind of the thing I think that's a commenter talked about was that he was so good at like writing that line between being a homer and just sort of describing the action. And it's funny, he in one of the stories I read about in one of the obituaries talked about how he was the runner-up to Dave Niehaus for the Mariners job, which I don't think I knew, or at least didn't remember. But it kind of doesn't surprise me because those two guys were really kind of in the same vein. Like
Absolutely,
they were great at painting a picture, were clearly homers, but they were not homers. Which is, you know, I think most people, if you've listened to broadcasters, I think you kind of know what I'm trying to get at.
They could, what Bob Rob could do and what Niehaus could do is when things weren't going well, they could kind of pull themselves back from that. Like they like Bob Rob was able to kind of capture how you were feeling
right
following the game.
Right.
Like, so if there was a big play at the Cougs, you know, he did a really good job raising his voice and doing whatever he needed to do. He had great turns of phrase, like they're going to fly home without an airplane, which we traced back to the Alamo Bowl in '94.
Yep.
We did a little research to try to figure out where that was from.
Yep.
So yeah, he had great stuff, and yeah, for me it was just I've been a Coug since 2003, so those first like 8 years or so, there was a lot of games that weren't on TV. So we listened to Bob Rob. I remember specifically, I was at a wedding the day of the 2003 Oregon game, and by the time we got in the car and turned the radio on, it was like, you know, 35 to, you know, it's like they were up by like 4 touchdowns, and it was like the second quarter. Like we're like, what the hell? And like you immediately turn on Bob Rob, and he's just, you're in it, and you know how this feels. Like you haven't been experiencing it, but you know how people are feeling, because he just has the perfect level of excitement and disbelief for that moment, because that was just an unbelievable moment. Obviously, anyway, I hate to use that term, but it was like, you would have not thought that WC was going to go in and paste the ranked Sports Illustrated Ducks like that.
Right.
But it was such a fun game, and I only got to listen to it mostly on the radio in the car, and it was just like, but it's kind of a nice memory to know that to have that. And I know that a lot of people talk about they would turn the TV off and turn the volume off on the TV, turn the radio on. I was never very good at that because I get bothered by the timing differences.
Yeah.
But yeah, which obviously that speaks pretty highly of what people thought of him.
Yeah.
So just some of the things that people talked about, talking about 2008 and 9, you know, he talking about, he said Tyree Team were bland or Stripling made the tackle, but his word, this is from Riverhawk 38, But his words were, "The ball carrier finished the play like a pickup truck hitting a motorcycle and sliding to a stop other than actually being tackled. Painful to hear, but hilarious." So yeah, like exactly what we're talking about. He's good at capturing the moment and capturing the feeling that you are feeling. Because yeah, he was a homer, but he wasn't just a pure homer. He wasn't just, Pravda. Like he could still, capture exactly what you want. And yeah, there's some other good stuff. I don't know if we have Jessica Ann Roberts, who used to write for us. Said she was able to interview him with Justin McIntyre, and so that was a big highlight. Everyone that had interactions with him just says nicest human being.
Yep.
He's obviously I live in Tacoma, and he's big here because the broadcast booth at Cheney Stadium is named after him because he was a broadcaster for the Rainiers at one time, and so he even was around in the last couple of years. I know people that have only worked for the Rainiers for a couple of years and got to know him because he was just such a great personality.
Yep. Yeah, it's the same thing with me in terms of listening to the broadcasts when they weren't on TV, right? So the 1997 Rose Bowl year, I mean, I don't remember exactly how many it was. And I actually I was able to attend most of the games one way or another, but there were a few that I didn't. And yeah, so as a sports reporter for the Daily Evergreen, we still got to write a story even if we're not at the game, even if it's not on TV. So, I'd sit by the radio and take notes and listen to the post-game interviews and take quotes out of the post-game interviews, he just, I can still hear, touchdown Washington State, in my head.
Yeah.
And, it just was great to have a guy like that around for so long, and the amount of institutional knowledge. I think is the other thing. Like he would, during a broadcast, he'd pull out some, memory from 30 years ago. Oh yeah, that's like, this game 30 years ago, and I'm like, bro, I don't even remember. And I'm 43, and I don't remember games from 3 years ago.
Yeah,
to lose someone like that really, really, really sucks. And, I think, a testament to the person he was too. I think Matt Chazanow talked about this, when Chazanow was brought in, it was pretty well known that Robertson was not like all for this move, right? Like he wanted to continue to be the lead guy. And, but he handled it, like you would expect him to handle it. And, he was a champ and super gracious, and definitely didn't, take out whatever resentment he had for Bill Moose on Chazanow, and so I think Chazanow appreciates that, and he's talked about that. And we're fortunate too. I mean, I think Matt Chazanow is great. We've kind of gone from one to the next, and I've kind of been waiting. This is going to sound weird, but I've kind of been waiting for Chazanow to leave because I'm like, he's really, really good, and he's not from the Northwest. He's basically relocated to Pullman. I think he was an East Coast guy.
Yeah, I think he went to Syracuse.
Yeah, so. But here we are 5 years later, and he's still around and doing a good job. So hopefully, I don't know that anybody thinks they get into the game to be a broadcaster for the same team for 50 years. But here's to hoping, that torch gets carried on, by Chazanow for at least a little while. It's nice having, a voice that you associate with a franchise. And we've had a lot of those in Seattle, right? I mean, between Niehaus and Calabro and, for Husky fans, Bob Rondo, it's nice when you have that voice, that you can associate with it.
Yeah. I'm going to correct myself. He was 91. I said 92 earlier. That's what you get for just talking off the cuff.
So close.
But yeah, so, I see Hollywood Cougs wall of text here. It's I would say go to Coug Center if you want to see the whole thing. But basically, they'd like to bring boom boxes to the student section and blare Bob Roberts' call, which is
along with a cooler of alcohol.
Yeah. So times were different. If I recall, Hollywood was in school during the Mount St. Helens eruption. So. Yeah, that was 1980. So
that predates you and I by a bit.
Yep. Well, yeah. So yeah, if you guys have any, stories to share about Bob Rob, we got a post on Coug Center.
Yeah, please do.
Feel free to drop in. But yeah, I wish that I had more experiences with him to share, but I don't, and so I don't want to try to pretend that I do.
Yeah, probably the last straw was that there were no Cougar football games to look forward to this fall. That'd be my guess.
Yeah. That's a bummer. Obviously, this weekend would be the home opener for the Cougs. We would have been playing Houston. Sorry.
We would have been game
world.
number 2.
Yeah, it would have been game number 2. Probably going for 2-0 because Utah State, it's not very good. But yeah, it's a whole different world. That I think of all the home openers that have dealing with smoke, and it would have been similar to that.
Right.
That's not a unique thing, and being really hot.
That's pretty much an annual deal at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I think it's when college football was actually being played last Saturday, it was finally hitting me that I wasn't going to be going to Pullman for football games. If you haven't heard of it, Wright Thompson has a great kind of video story. Wright Thompson, ESPN, they produced, because he's I want to say Ole Miss fan. Yeah, Ole Miss. And so he did basically Wright Thompson's a phenomenal writer. If you don't know who he is, you should probably just read anything that he's ever written.
Anything you can find.
Yeah.
Literally anything.
So he wrote an essay, and then they had him read it, and then they had footage of him at an Ole Miss game and all this stuff. And it was really good. And that really kind of, when it kind of hit me, like, oh, man, this is going to suck. Like, and I think, like, this is a bit personal, but my mom just got diagnosed with cancer. Sorry. And her treatment doesn't start for like 3 weeks, and it would have been really nice to take her to Pullman. Sorry, I practiced this before, but it would have been nice to take her to Pullman, and it would have been nice to take her to Pullman and have that weekend. She hasn't been to Pullman since I was in school, because, she lived in California. And it would have been fun to, like, have that fun time before all this shit that she's going to have to deal with coming up. And that really hit me, obviously, as you can hear it. That was a real bummer. And just on top of that, I think my sister's birthday party, we would have had in Pullman the next weekend after that. I'd have been taking my dad to a couple of games. I would have been taking B to a game or two. I've been taking, all these people that I love taking and experiencing Pullman with, hanging out with BA and hanging out with Kyle Sherwood and all the other people that we see. It's a serious bummer to not have that. It's just a huge community thing for me. And obviously it combining it with some other things, it's pretty difficult. But I was sorry, I wasn't meant to do that. So obviously we were going to have the games this weekend. We're not having them. It's a challenge. And for me, Jeff, we obviously have, as we're recording this, there's NFL games going on. I really wasn't getting into the college football games or that weekend. For me, it's like, of all the sports coming back, the hardest for me to get into has been football.
Yeah. I think for me, so I think there's two things. One is, the thing that we actually really look forward to is the Cougs, right? I mean, that's the thing that,
yep.
Everything else is just sort of a, like it's an extension of our love for Cougar football, right? So it's like, if I know you and I both, plan our weekends around Cougar football. I mean,
right.
You travel. I don't get to travel to very many games, but I know that, like, on the calendar, it's, the Cougs play at whatever time. And it's just like, everybody in my family knows you're either watching the game with me or you are, or you're staying out of the basement while I watch the game. That's like a non-negotiable. Because pretty much everything else is negotiable except for that. And so, without that, it's hard to get all that excited. I think part of it too is I just sort of, I just sort of figured that, like, for example, the NFL, I figured they wouldn't even make it to this point,
Yeah, right.
especially after seeing what baseball went through.
Yeah.
I'm
surprised baseball is still going. I did not.
Yeah, like honestly, I kind of expected that that football would go the way of baseball, and that something would break out, and all of a sudden a team wouldn't be able to play. I mean, even MLS kind of had to deal with that to some degree.
Yeah.
A couple teams had breakouts before they went to their bubble, but I think part of it is we don't really need to talk to the NFL, but anyway, they made it. So now I'm like, oh, okay, now it's here, and I guess I'll get excited about the Seahawks on Sunday. But it just doesn't feel the same, which kind of makes me think maybe I'm not as into football as I thought I was.
Yeah, right.
Like I think that might also be part of it too. Like maybe I'm just not into football. I mean, I know like last Saturday I spent the day watching soccer mostly.
Yeah, same.
And part of it was the games were terrible and the teams were terrible. But it's like, I just was like, I'd rather watch, random MLS game at this point than, random college football game, which is a little weird. It'll probably be different when it's, an ACC game or an SEC game or a Big 12 game. I'm sure that'll be different, but it's still not appointment viewing for me. And maybe part of it is too, somebody else mentioned this on a podcast I was listening to, and I don't know how you feel about this, but our seasons are all effed up. Like it's like we're not even like to the conference finals of the NBA playoffs.
Yeah.
Like,
and it would be
it's
NBA
fucking September, dude.
Yeah.
Like it's the middle of September and the NBA is still not
so
even to their
weird.
conference finals. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's just on some level it's messing with our heads.
Yeah, and hey, the NBA has been fun. The bubble has been a blast, and it'd be great if we had that sort of thing, in football. Maybe it'd be more intriguing if it was, they did some sort of different. But basically, football is kind of the same as it's going to be for the NFL, and then college football is just kind of weird because you have teams with weird schedules, especially the small teams are playing each other twice, multiple times,
just trying to play games.
Yep. The hope is that COVID doesn't take hold, but yeah, I mean, obviously we're seeing sports with people in the stands, like the Dallas soccer team, FC Dallas. That's just crazy to me, but considering we over here in the Pac-12 we're not even bothering to play the game, so I still think I think the Pac-12 did a good job laying out their reasoning for shutting down. You still kind of in the back of your mind, you're like, everyone else is doing it. Can't we do it too?
Well, they're gonna look awful silly if the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 get through their seasons without very much difficulty. I don't know. It's it's. I think the other part is too. It's the stuff that we really look forward to with the season. I mean, there's so much else. You mentioned this with Wright Thompson. I mean, that was sort of the gist of his piece, was that college football isn't just about the games.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's hard to communicate to a non-college football fan.
Yeah.
There are very few other sports where it's sort of the same kind of deal. I would argue that, probably MLS with some franchises, the same, Seattle Sounders fan, it's the same kind of deal. There's a lot of community built into it. You got supporters groups, things like that. So there's probably some, a handful of MLS teams that are in a similar situation. But, you talk to random Seahawks fan, it's like, it's for them, it's mostly built around, tuning in at 1:00 on a Sunday.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily built around, gathering with friends and sharing long-term memories. And, it's like with this, like I mentioned, I don't get to travel to games a whole lot, but, I do get that sense of community and camaraderie with you and the other authors at Coug Center. Like, our Slack channel is, super fun during games and during the season. And we talk Cougs and we share memories, not just of, the games that are going, but, our times in school. And we're all, different ages. There's a few guys that are my age and a few guys that are your age. And we've got a few that are younger. And, so we've got these different sort of generations of Cougs and, we all sort of get to share, but we all have this thing in common, right? We all spent, multiple formative years in Pullman. So, losing out on that, I think, has been the part that's been, the bummer. And like I said, Wright Thompson talked about that, but it's kind of hitting me a little bit that, I'm not getting that, with my buddies. And, our Slack channels are, our discussions at this, they're pretty brief these days, and they're not a lot of real long days, talking about, what the heck's wrong with the defense or whatever. So it's definitely hampering my, just sort of all around. It's definitely hampering my ability to, to really get into any other football that's going on, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe we can take a quick break, and then let's get into what Mr. Skip Bayless, loudmouth, famous loudmouth, said today.
And we're back.
All right. Well, let's first, before we get into the other thing I said, let's get into this beer, because we're actually drinking the same beer as we're in the same place.
Because we're in the same place.
And beer, this beer has some special meaning for you, Jeff.
Special, Craig.
Let's hear about it.
All right. So this beer, I bought this beer.
Why don't you tell them what the beer is?
Okay, so the beer is it's Iridium Flare BA Honey Strong Ale from Bottle Logic Brewing in Anaheim, California. So I bought this beer when I was in Anaheim on a vacation to Disneyland, oddly enough, right? And so I bought it. Now, this is the 2017 release. Now, it's not weird that I'm drinking a 2017 beer, because goodness knows when I hang out with you, you will pull out 2017, 2016, 2015 beers. And so it's not like I've never had a 2017, a 3-year-old beer, right? However, I have never had a 3-year-old beer that lived in my house for 3 years, because I am not that patient. And so this beer, and basically what happened was, so I bought it down there, and I'm like, it's a pint bottle.
Well, do you remember the story of when you bought it?
Oh yeah. So this was 3 years ago, right? Yeah. My beer spending habits were, let's just say, they were not as liberal as they are right now. Where I would have not thought much about spending that much on a bottle of beer, a really good bottle of beer, right? Okay, so number one, I bought this beer in Anaheim. Number two, I bought it. Do you remember this? I bought it at the magical convenience store across the street from the hotel where we were staying, that had so apparently it's not weird for convenience stores to carry actually pretty decent craft brew. And so I went across the street and I saw they had a whole bunch of Bottle Logic beers, and I had already been at the brewery and had some beers, and had their, whatever, I forget the name of it, but I think we're going to have this later, their barrel-aged vanilla stout. Down goes B's tray.
Luckily,
from her high chair.
B was not in the high chair.
Thank goodness B was not in the high chair. So anyway, I'd already been there and had some, and I hadn't bought a bottle, and then I went across the street to buy some beer, and I saw they had all these, and I went, oh yeah, man, I should, you know what? I'm going to buy one and take one home. And I called Craig, and I'm like, hey, you want one? I took a picture, and he's like, where is this at? And I'm like, at the convenience store across the street. I don't know. And he's like, yeah, I'll take one of whatever it was. And so okay. So I take him up to the cash register, and then I don't even remember how much it was. I just remember it was the first time I've ever spent was it $30 or something?
Yeah.
It's like a $30 bottle of beer. And I was like,
and you had two of them.
And I had two of them. I put two of them on the counter, and the guy goes, that'll be $60 whatever dollars. And I'm like, yes, of course it'll be $60 whatever dollars. Here's my card.
Sarah was in the car, luckily.
Actually, I walked across. I was able to walk there.
Okay, yeah.
So that was good. But I just went, well, it's vacation. I'm fine. So, but I can honestly say I have not spent $30 on a bottle of beer since.
Yeah, I remember you messaged me like, oh my God. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. Those beers are not cheap.
Forgot to tell you about that. So yeah, so I took it back across the street and took it back home, and then it's like a 14% beer, and I was like, I had this thing in my head. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to share it with Craig someday. And we just have not gotten together all that many times. And most of the time when we do, we end up drinking your beer. So I'm just like, okay. So I've been holding on to it. So tonight, finally tonight, I brought this, can I say, weird ass beer.
This is a weird ass beer. All right.
Over here, because I don't have a better way to describe it other than a weird ass beer, man. This is a strange beer.
So this is a collaboration with Superstition Meadery, and mead is a big ass honey wine, and Superstition's one of the like the most popular, famous ones in the country right now. They make some really thick, fruity ones. They have a series called Berry White where they have different berries, and I've had this beer is made with marionberries, and I've had the marionberry Berry White, and it is very similar to that. I wouldn't be surprised if this is just a blend. So, like, just a blend of that beer, or maybe it was aged in the barrel from the mead. I'm not sure.
But yeah, it's very berry and very honey.
It's brewed with honey and marionberries. I wouldn't be surprised if it was just straight up blended with the mead, because it tastes a lot like the mead. Like it just tastes a lot like mead,
which I've never had. I've never had mead.
So this tastes a lot like Superstition mead, very sweet and thick. That's kind of the way meads are very popular right now. These thick, fruity meads, where they put this is nuts. Like this actually tastes more like a mead than a beer to me.
Okay.
I like if you close my eyes and you handed it to me, I would probably think it was a mead. It's actually, so the name for a beer that's kind of mead beer hybrid is called a braggot, which is a funny name. But yeah, this is they say it's a. Here, let's see. Our mead-inspired combo breaker, because they're like a nerd brewery, combo breaker, is a concentrated punch of sweetness drawn out across a thick, viscous body. I would much describe it as a viscous body. Arizona wildflower honey succumbs to the tart brightness of marionberries with bruleed sugar barrel finish. Bruleed sugar barrel.
Okay.
End transmission. That's so their suggested pairings are Marin's Glass. I don't know what kind of food that is. Lamb ragout.
Lamb ragout.
And creme brulee.
All right. I could see this with creme brulee for sure.
It might make the creme brulee taste less sweet, like because it would overpower it.
Well, and you obviously you know a lot more than I do about what aging does to a beer. So is it possible that like some of these flavors were maybe a little more mellow when they were fresh and they've drawn out more, but flavors tend to more mellow over time?
No, yeah, I bet this was even more intense with the berry flavor when you first got it. Yeah, it's probably good.
Because it's definitely still very berry.
I think it's probably good that you sat on it. It probably would have been ridiculous. And Bottle Logic is kind of famous for kind of over-the-top flavors. Like they have a raspberry stout that's like straight up raspberry, jam the radar. Their vanilla stout, which we're going to drink later, is very, very, very vanilla. That's kind of their hallmark. But they also, the cool thing about Bottle Logic, they're kind of like the Fremont of Southern California, where they make a lot of grocery store beers, and then they have like an incredible barrel age program, and they make so much of it that you can find a lot of their barrel aged beers just everywhere.
Yeah, their grocery store beer, I don't remember what the name of the IPA was, but I know they served it in California Adventure, and so I was talking to the guy at the bar, and he was talking about how basically the money they were making off of selling all of that beer at Disneyland was sort of subsidizing is not really the right word, but enabled them to be profitable enough to do some of this more of this other adventurous stuff. Because they were just, when they signed that contract with Disney to provide all that beer, it was like,
that's a lot of beer.
That's a lot of beer, man. And there ain't nothing like parents who are walking around California Adventure all day with their kids going,
oh, I can get a beer.
I don't even care how much that beer costs.
Yeah.
$10 at the $10 beer, I'll take the $10 beer. It's not, it's like worse than being at a Seahawks game. Don't even care. I've been with my kids all day.
Yeah.
Give me that beer.
So yeah, if you're down in if you're down in Anaheim, whenever
Yes.
the world goes back to normal and you're
Yes.
going to Disneyland,
Yes.
just not far away.
No, it's not. It's just a couple miles.
Just a couple miles away, Bottle
Yep.
Logic.
Yeah,
Highly
and I was very
recommend.
glad I went. Yeah, and this is, like I said, it's weird, but see, like the funny thing, so you said, it tastes like mead. Like to me, it basically tastes like a barley wine that's got honey and Marionberry flavor.
Yeah,
to
it definitely got some barley wine. Like they call a strong ale, but it's definitely got some barley wine aspects. But they're kind of masked by the Marionberry and the honey quite a bit.
It is. It definitely.
I have
it
some
definitely is.
I had some kind of goo.
Oh yeah, there's sediment for sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've
I
seen
got
it
some
worse.
right on the bottom.
Like
there.
some barrel aged stouts, you just get
Yeah.
a thick jelly sort of stuff. It's kind of gross.
Yeah. But I got to say, I'm
I don't
it's
mind
cool
it.
to finally break into it.
Yeah, it's something different.
That felt good.
Braggot, get your
Yeah.
braggots.
Yeah. That's probably the only time I'll ever do that.
Yeah,
I just do not.
you're not going to find many.
If I spend the
braggots.
money on the beer, I want to drink the beer.
Yeah, right.
So,
Well,
Anyway.
thanks for saving it.
yeah.
I'm glad I got to try
Little
it.
special moment.
Yeah,
Little special.
we had the other one you
friend
bought
moment.
really quickly.
Yeah, we did.
It was pretty quick
tore
after
into that
I think
pretty
I
quick.
came over to watch a Sounders game,
Yeah.
which we're going to be doing later. So, but yeah, so let's move on to less happy times.
Yeah.
So I saw this today, and we just had to talk about it. So, Jeff, you haven't heard it yet.
No, so this is
So-
the first time I'm hearing it, so
so-
you're going to get my unfiltered reaction.
So I'm going to have you do your comments first. I'm not even going to preface it. This is what Skip Bayless said on his show Undisputed today regarding Dak Prescott talking about his.
Do they have the audio of Prescott on there?
No.
Okay, so should we give a little background?
Yeah, we'll
on
give a
that
little
part?
background. Okay, so Dak Prescott basically came out, discussed how during the pandemic he was feeling depressed and he was having a hard time working out. Obviously, Dak Prescott is the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. Skip got his start, I believe, as a Dallas Morning News writer, I want to say, or that's where he made his name.
That might be it. I honestly don't remember.
I know he's got a Dallas connection.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly where he was beforehand, which I guess should tell you something about how long he's been saying ridiculous things on the television. But
he says a lot of dumb stuff. Obviously, his LeBron stuff and all that stuff. But this is something that's actually infuriating and completely off base. So let me play it for you.
I'm going to ask our audience to feel free to go ahead and condemn me if you choose as cold-blooded and insensitive on this issue. I have deep compassion for clinical depression. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the quarterback of an NFL team, you know this as well as better than I do. It's the ultimate leadership position in sports. Am I right about that? Mm-hmm. You are commanding an entire franchise. What's the roster now? Is it 53 still?
53, but I think they got like 15 practice squad guys.
Okay. But you're commanding a lot of young men and some older men. And they're all looking to you to be their CEO, to be in charge of the football team. Because of all that, I don't have sympathy for him going public with, I got depressed. I suffered depression early in COVID to the point that I couldn't even go work out. Look, he's the quarterback of America's team.
yeah, that's pretty shitty.
Yeah.
My gosh. Yeah, like he knew what was. Number one, I think most of what Bayless says, he knows where it's going to end up. He's not an idiot. He didn't become a multi-millionaire by being a fool, despite the fact that he plays one on TV, right? So right at the very beginning, he says, "Oh, a lot of people are going to condemn me for this, but right." So he knew what the reaction was going to be. This is obviously a topic that's near and dear to us, on a number of levels. The obvious one, right, is that the mental health of one of our quarterbacks at Washington State was such that he, ended his own life, right? And so the idea that somehow anybody is or should be above mental health challenges is insane. I mean, but you know, Skip Bayless is also the same person who says things like, you know, if you're injured, that shows weakness. I mean, it's just it's this faux sort of macho projection that he does, right? I mean, Skip Bayless is not an athlete, you know. Skip Bayless is nothing. He's a yard barker, and you know, the projecting that he does onto other people is really sad, and that was a pretty fucked up take.
Yeah, I was really fucking pissed earlier when I shared that with you guys on Slack, and obviously you didn't have time between then to listen to it, so I'm kind of glad. Okay, your kind of raw response, because I was pretty similar to mine. You know, I immediately thought of Tyler, how that's exactly the type of thinking in sports that led Tyler, that when you hear no one knew what was going on with him, not even his parents. And I'm going to flip it and say what Dak Prescott did is a sign of a good leader. A good leader needs to show some vulnerability because he needs to let his charges know that they can be vulnerable too. And so if Dak, who's one of the most famous NFL players, probably one of the top 10 most famous NFL players, is able to admit something like that, there's a whole lot of people that'll feel better about maybe talking about their own mental health struggles. And, you know, I have been through some of this before, and it was really hard to get over that stigma of saying, hey, I have something going on and I need to get it treated, or I need to deal with it. I need some help. And I think obviously with Prescott, it wasn't just COVID, it was his brother's death, and there was a lot going on. And I think it shows courage, and it's really truly responsible to share something like that when you are of that status, to be able to show your vulnerability, to be able to expose challenges you've going through. Because you're talking a lot of people that go through things like this, probably more than half the people that you come across. So this is just it was a positive thing that Dak did. And Skip Bayless is totally fucking off his mark with this take, and he knew it. He obviously knew it. That's what's stupid. That's what's stupid about all of this. He knew what he said and was dumb, and because the way he prefaced it, like you said, Jeff, and it's completely ridiculous to put out there, but it also shows that there are a lot of people that think that way, and this is the exact type of thinking that the Hilinskis with Hilinski Hope are trying to battle. They're trying to get rid of. The stigma that they're trying to get rid of, where it's okay to talk about when things are going wrong with you mentally. Yeah. Because if Dak Prescott broke his arm, we'd all know about it. Yeah. But he's got something going on with his brain. Apparently, we're not allowed to say it. So, yeah, fuck off, Skip Bayless. Fuck off into the sun. Honestly, this is something I've seen people get fired from jobs like this for less. Yeah. But we'll see how above, reproach he is. I think the positive. So if we're going to take positives out of this, one is Dak doing what he did is a positive, right? Yep. Here's one of the quotes: said, "Before I can lead, I've got to make sure that my mind is in the right place to do that. I think that's important, to be vulnerable, to be genuine, and to be transparent." So, for him to say that in the first place, is a pretty massive step forward. Bayless is getting pretty roundly dragged for this. It's not like there's all that many people, at least prominent people, agreeing with him, right? I mean, I'm sure there are, internet trolls in Russia that, are supporting him on it. But, most people are condemning what he said. And so if there's anything positive come out of that, we could say, all right, that this has become enough of a topic in our society that, when someone says some of that faux macho bullshit that Bayless said, everybody goes, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's not okay. It's just not just how we think about those things anymore. That's not how we do this. That's not what we look at. It's just not okay. And, the thing that
the thing that pisses me off the most, and I'm sure this is, you know, part of what you were thinking too, is like, you know, that kind of thinking gets people killed.
Right.
And I mean, and that's not an exaggeration. We know that from experience. You know, it leads people into dark places, the idea that you cannot talk about it. You know, and even people who know they should be able to talk about it oftentimes still can't talk about it. So I guess the fact that it's out there, I guess, is good. You know, kudos to Dak for what he said. Screw you, Skip Bayless. But, you know, for the rest of us who realize how wrong that is, you know, just being able to say that that's wrong, hopefully maybe encourages someone somewhere to be honest and transparent. It doesn't necessarily take grand gestures, but, you know, maybe a little recognition of what someone is going through, or you know, maybe someone recognize it in themselves. So, yeah.
Again, cheers to Dak Prescott. Massive cheers to Skip Bayless. Go away. We're tired of you.
When was the last time that guy said anything like
relevant,
useful, productive?
Yeah, this had a good.
I mean, he's made an entire career out of trashing LeBron James.
Yeah,
like that's basically the stone he's been, you know, laying on right now, and it's. I mean, basically what he's saying about
right now
Prescott.
For like 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, right now, basically what he's saying about Prescott is what he said about LeBron James, weak leader. You know, everything's about leadership, and you know who's, you know, with LeBron, it was always, you know, he doesn't take over games at the end. He's not Michael Jordan, you know. But it's all that faux macho garbage, and you know.
Yeah, it's what it is. Definitely this kind of machismo nonsense that I'm sick and tired of. It's bad for young men. It's bad for women. It's bad for everyone. It's a sickness that needs to be rooted out. Where there's this sort of, you know, you don't hear people say things like man code and you know, stuff like that as much anymore. And I think because we've realized it's kind of stupid. But this is definitely kind of a spin-off of crap like that. Where like, oh, you're a macho man, you can't talk about your feelings, which maybe you feel that way. But honestly, like Jeff said, not talking about your feelings might lead to some very dark places. So,
no kidding.
Man, some heavy stuff today. Sorry, everyone. We gotta have some funny thing to talk about before we kick this off. So,
all right, what's funny? What's fun?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Let's. Well, I don't want to take a break because we're pretty close to wrapping this up. So we're potty training B. That's again.
Oh, I gotta tell you,
this is the third try.
It was definitely the highlight of my week to come over here and have B. So like I would imagine most of the listeners, the vast majority of listeners, have never met B, so they really don't know what I'm talking about, But B is, without a doubt, one of the most delightful small children I have ever been around. And that's I don't say that because Craig's sitting across from me. It's legitimately true. Like B is, she's smiling, she's laughing. She's a total ham. Like she will sing, she will dance, she will act. She will chat you up. The funniest thing she did, and I haven't mentioned this to you yet, but this is something that made me laugh. So we're sitting around eating dinner. And so the three adults are talking, and B's just sort of eating her food. And then I don't even remember what we said, but we said something that made the three adults laugh. And so B joined in because she felt like, oh, everybody's laughing. And then she's just going, ha, 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 ha. And I was just like, that is the most adorable thing I've seen, at least in, I don't know, days at least. So yeah, that was super awesome. I got to come over and hang out and see Amanda and see B, and that's definitely a happy thing.
Do you want to stick around till 3 a.m. when she wets the bed and wakes up screaming, and we have her sitting on the toilet and she is very mad?
Nope. No, I don't. Those days are behind me until I have grandchildren.
Yeah, so
I am not dealing with that at all. But that's okay. Yeah, I was telling Amanda that, you know, the happiest day of my life was the last diaper I changed after 3 children. I don't know. I mean, I was trying to think. I guess I must have changed diapers for about 9 years straight.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
For 8 or 9 years, except for when, you know, my kids went to grandparents for a couple of days or whatever. But But yeah, that's a lot of damn diapers. And so Godspeed with your potty training. And, no, I will not be here at 3 a.m. to help you.
Yeah. So thanks, B, for providing the lightness today. I guess we talked about a little bit about Xavier Ward is their quarterback.
Yeah, that's another happy thing.
Yeah, the quarterback commit for the 2021 class.
At least until he decommits and flips to somebody else.
God damn it, Jeff. Is basically his rating has been bumped. He's now the top recruit in the class, as Coug Center staff reported.
Yeah,
today.
Coug Center staff who published that after somebody's contract hours started at work. Not going to say who.
Not going to say who. But yeah, God bless the Coug Center staff. Byline.
That guy really comes through.
Yeah, he's always, he seems to only publish in the middle of the day. It's weird.
It's weird. It's very strange.
He doesn't really participate in the Slack. I don't even know where he comes from. But
yeah, he just swoops in and saves the day.
Breaking news only. But yeah, so Xavier Ward, he's went from a low 3-star and now he's a higher 3-star. But of course, that means that bigger programs are sniffing after him.
Yeah, I think that's always pretty inevitable. It's good and bad news, right? Like, on the one hand, it's good that Nick Rolovich was able to identify a guy who appears to be on the rise, right? One of the noteworthy things about him is that he's 16 going into his senior year. Now, I don't know if he is still 16. I imagine he's not. I imagine he probably turned 17 over the summer, would be my guess. But he was 16 when he committed back in June. He's a guy who obviously you would hope at that age was still growing into his skill set, growing into his body. And at this point, 3 months later, hopefully he's, continuing to mature, right? So at the time I thought, hey, this is a good kid for them to sign. You've got these 3 quarterbacks in the program already between Cam Cooper and Gunnar Cruz and Jaden Delora. So you've got these 3 guys. And then you sign a guy who, might take, a couple of years to really reach his full potential, but maybe the potential is really high. So that part was all good. The downside is, of course, other people come sniffing around. But, what you really hope for is that dominoes don't start falling, right? These programs that, so for example, 2 that were prominently mentioned, USC, Arizona State, those are programs that already have quarterbacks committed. USC's got 2 quarterbacks, 2 like 4-star quarterbacks committed. So they've already got commitments. But what happens is, okay, so what if Arizona State's quarterback decommits, flips, and then all of a sudden there's this domino effect, right, where people start calling down the list. So, if I were to say, is it likely if he ends up at WSU? I'd say it's likely, right? Yeah. But, you never know. Yeah. And typically the quarterback musical chairs happens a lot earlier than all the other musical chairs. The top guys are generally committing, April, whatever. But where sometimes it goes sideways is maybe a top guy, and I don't know if this is the case this year, but, maybe a top guy is waiting to decide. And you've got, 3 or 4 major programs after, you've got Ohio State and Clemson and Alabama after one guy or whatever. And so then when he finally commits to Ohio State, now, these other schools they're not really scrambling, but they are now moving down their list, and they're not afraid to call up a guy who's already committed to, Washington State or whatever. Yeah. Notre Dame did that a few years ago with Ian Book.
Right.
Ian Book was committed to WSU. Notre Dame had a guy, and then they didn't have a guy, or they missed out on a guy, or whatever it was. They call up Ian Book. Hey, how you want to come? You want to come play at Notre Dame? Ian Book's like, heck yeah, I want to come play at Notre Dame, and he left. And in the end, it worked out okay. But it was, I'm pretty sure after that we landed Tyler. I think that's right. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but anyway,
I think that's about right.
Yeah, but anyway, it worked out fine. It's just, these things happen. So what you hope is that, the wrong team doesn't miss out on their guy. You think for a kid in California, he's probably more likely to be on the fast dial of a West Coast school. And frankly, those schools are already, I think, pretty well said, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of musical chairs.
Yeah, USC already has 2 QB commits.
Yeah.
So they would need a couple dominoes to fall to kick that.
Yeah.
And Arizona is not necessarily a school, or is it Arizona State? Either one is not necessarily a school that a guy is going to jump to over WSU, particularly offensively.
Yeah. Yep. So, if anything, I know that it's in our DNA to get worked up and worried and panic and think like the worst possible thing is going to happen. But I would say that I have no inside knowledge whatsoever. But I think it's probably more likely than not he ends up there. And I'd say if anything, look, we were not real thrilled about how the recruiting class started.
Right.
With Rolovich, and we were just sort of like, man, this is. Yikes, but that's like really turned around. It's really turned around.
Yep.
He's landed a bunch of guys that are in the wheelhouse of where our recruits typically are, the mid to mid high.
During the Leach era.
Yeah, the Leach era. Look, it's the mid to high, 3-star guys. They haven't landed a splashy guy, a 4-star guy or anything like that. Leach landed a few of those, but not
a lot.
Not a lot at all. Like you can count them on one hand.
Yeah.
So, it's not surprising that he hasn't landed any of those guys. And, I think there was a thought among the optimists that when he was getting commitments from sort of some of those lower guys at the very beginning, and we were all just like, yikes, dude, this is like Paul Wolf type stuff. We're beating out, Eastern for guys. There was a thought among the optimists that, hey, he's just getting some commitments going to kind of get the class going, to get kind of jumpstart to get it going. And I thought, come on, like that's, and maybe that wasn't the reason, but as it turned out, it did work out that way. That the lowest rated guys were the guys who committed first, and ever since it's been higher rated guys. One of the interesting things, and this is kind of a tangent, but something I noticed this morning looking at the class, which is at this point 2/3 full. A lot of Texas in there. And it's interesting to me how each staff kind of has their spots that they're able to hit. And I know a lot was made of Rolovich and his emphasis on Washington, and he's gonna, no, he's doing the same thing they've all done. Like he tried, he gave it an honest effort, but the results are always the same. You're not going to get very many guys from Washington. Right now you got Edson, who's, a defensive lineman. He's a low 3-star guy. Okay. That's kind of where it lands. But I think there's 4 or 5 guys from Texas, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I think we sort of expected that. I think we did get some of that early on, with Leach's staff early, cause he brought so many guys from, Texas Tech with him. But, pretty interesting that's where the class is going. And, it's definitely spread out and not, honed in on one particular region. And, it seems like they're doing a good job recruiting if you trust the evaluators, which, they tend to be pretty accurate.
Yeah. And there's also the caveat of they can't bring guys to Pullman. So you give them more credit. Cause it really is about,
that's where I think you miss out on the 4-star guys. Any shot you would have at those guys, I think that's where you're missing it.
You find that 4-star that actually really wants that family vibe and that small town
or
vibe.
at the very least intrigued, right? Like at the idea of it.
Yeah, or intrigued to being the star too, just the guy, the Gabe Marks or whatever of the world. And so recruiting. Woo!
Yeah.
It's nice to be back, dude. We haven't done this in a while. We haven't recorded in a while. I'm sure the people were starving for it. Hopefully we'll be able to record some podcasts about fake NCAA
fake
football soon.
That'll be awesome.
Those of you who are trying to follow the streaming of the season, I'm trying to put out PlayStation 3s were never made for streaming. There's a technical issue with them.
Are you saying that a device made in like 2012 was not made for streaming in 2020?
2006, man.
Dear God, are you serious?
That's when the PlayStation 3 came out.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It came out the fall of my senior year.
Okay, that's crazy pants.
That's fall of my senior year at WSU. I remember one of my roommates camped out in front of Shopko to get one and then sell it. So, I remember when that happened. Yeah, I guess it was November 17th, 2006. So in 2006, no one was thinking about streaming video games on Twitch. which did not exist, of course. So there's some hardware that I need that I've gotten, hopefully, and so maybe this weekend, if I can get Preston, our Golden Throat, on board to call the games, to be the voice of the virtual digital Cougars, we'll, hopefully this weekend, and then we'll have some podcast coverage. We'll have recruiting coverage. I've got the recruiting fired up on there already. It's got the current rosters.
There's nothing like fake recruiting, man.
Spoiler, Cameron Cooper is the starting quarterback. That's who was the best quarterback when I downloaded the rosters.
I don't call that a spoiler. I'll call that a teaser.
Yeah, and so, but I tell you something I did do is bump up the stats of a few guys because Cameron Cooper was like a 78 in the starting quarterback. So
that
I was
is
like,
unacceptable.
Hell no, no one wants to watch us. No one wants to watch us lose every goddamn game this year. So I bumped up the stats.
Also, that's patently false.
Bumped up the stats for him and Calvin Jackson, who had a really pretty low rating. I did let Tay Martin stay at Oklahoma State. He was already on there on the roster. I didn't want to mess around with editing other rosters beyond WSU.
Yeah.
Beyond what have already been edited by other people, by whatever it was, Football Ops Sports or something. Sorry guys, wherever I got you from. Sorry, I need to find give Operation Sports. Yeah, so
there we go.
They do it every year. So I got that roster from there, and then just kind of bumped up the stats on a few offensive players. The defense, I had to create Skylar Thomas. He wasn't in there because they took him off because he had left. But they had Heckman on there as a fourth quarterback, so I turned him into a free safety. Or a strong safety, and so just because
probably equal free safety rating.
Yeah, because we just needed the depth. But yeah, so that's.
I mean, are we sure that Will Heckman's not going to be as good of a safety?
Yeah, who knows? Well, it's okay.
I don't know. Skylar Thomas will never hear this. He already blocked me on Twitter, even though I never tweeted at him in history.
Skylar Thomas is but he's the backup to Philip Powell, who maybe none of you remember because I kind of forgot he exists, but he's a grad transfer. I think from South Dakota or something. But so he's the starting safety. But yeah, So yeah, we got the updated rosters. I already got the recruiting cooking after the couple weeks. We're up until the first day, the first game against Utah State. I did make sure to get a few Washington guys in there just for you Washington recruiting lovers. But yeah, and also that's kind of one of the easiest ways to recruit on that game if anyone remembers from playing it a decade ago.
I got to say though, Craig, I'm excited for this, but I'm not sure if I'm prepared to lose an Apple Cup in 2020.
Yeah, I may have to edit the Huskies a little bit as well.
There may be some creative editing going on that end.
So WSU starts 23 ranked. I think the Huskies are 14. They're a little bit higher rated. Yeah. We might have to bring them down a notch at least for 1 week of the year.
Maybe they're going to have some strategically placed injuries.
There was definitely a part of it where I did not want this to be like a 3-9 simulation
because that wouldn't be very fun.
That would be fun. Like, yeah, we could maybe lose a game here or there, but like I don't want us to suck.
I mean, it would be weird if we went 12-0.
Yeah.
It also would be horrible if we went like 3-9. So we just need something like between like 6 wins and 10 wins. Or 6 and 9 wins is really kind of our sweet spot, I think. 10 would be like, that's incredible.
If we do make the college football playoff, well, I'll probably do it anyway. There is a way like that you can mod the game to kind of get a sort of college football playoff. So I'll probably do that, and so we can watch that too. So it should be fun. But yeah. Anyways, so I guess that's all we got. I want to go watch the Sounders. That's all we got.
Let's go watch the Sounders.
Yeah.
We'll get B down here to sing some more Sounders songs.
Sounds great.
All right, dude.
All right, go Cougs.
Go Cougs, Craig.